It's another video for our Grains Explorer Challenge for 2024. And for February, our grain that we will be focusing on and exploring is sorghum. Hey y'all, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on this channel, we talk all the things real whole grains from a biblical perspective. So as mentioned, this video is kind of a meet the grain to introduce the grain that we are doing for the month of February that we're exploring for our Grains Explorer Challenge. And if you're not sure what that is, it is a challenge that we are doing on this channel for 2024. So each month I'll be introducing a grain and we'll be focusing on that for that month. So challenge yourself to actually use these grains. And on the first Friday of every month is whenever a video comes out introducing you to the grain that month. Anyone can follow along, but for the full adventure with a guide, extra recipes, extra videos, and a huge community of fellow grainies, be sure to join the Grainy Bunch in order to have the full adventure for yourself. So for all the details about the Grains Explorer Challenge and even to join the Grainy Bunch, just go to grainsandgrit.com/grainsexplorer for all those details. Some of y'all may be familiar with sorghum because it's become a bit popular for those who are following a gluten-free diet, because sorghum is a gluten-free grain with many, many benefits. Or maybe you've only heard of sorghum in regards to sorghum syrup. Well, do know it actually is a grain, and we'll be exploring that today. So what we'll cover about sorghum is we're going to do a general overview about sorghum and its history, nutritional benefits, what sorghum is used for, the different types of sorghum that you can find and buy, and then of course, kind of an overview of how to use sorghum in your own kitchen. So first up, let's talk about the history and an overview of sorghum. Sorghum is believed to be one of the first domesticated grains. It originates, and archaeologists believe, about 5,000 years ago in what we know as modern-day Sudan. It was actually the staple grain for the kingdom of Alodia, I believe is how it's pronounced, which was founded sometime after the kingdom of Kush. If you're a CC parent, you probably just had the Kush Assyrians. You know. The kingdom of Kush fell around 350 AD is when this empire rose. And then after that's where archaeologists have found evidence of sorghum being that long ago. And then we believe that it went from Africa, spread up into India and China, and then into Australia. First known record of sorghum in the United States may actually surprise you. It actually comes from Benjamin Franklin in 1757, who wrote about its application in broom production. So as I mentioned, it is an ancient grain, but it's also a naturally occurring gluten-free grain as well. It's actually the fifth most produced grain in the world, with the United States being the top producer. In fact, we have what's called the sorghum belt here in the United States that consists of Kansas, Texas, Colorado, Oklahoma, and South Dakota, Kansas being the #1 producer of sorghum. It's praised for being a sustainable crop and good for the environment, and that is because that it is, when used for feed, every bit of it is actually used. It's drought resistant and able to be grown in harsh conditions where many other plants would fail. And its versatility and flexibility makes it not only available in the food and the feed industry, but also in other industries as well, like building materials and packing peanuts and many other places. Now, back in the 1960s, sorghum was really threatened by mildew and other diseases that I'm not even going to try to pronounce. But fortunately, scientists were able to produce a hybridization of sorghum to help combat these diseases. And let us pause there for a second. Yes, I said sorghum is hybridized. I'm here to wait for all the wheat belly people, the anti-wheat people, to now freak out about sorghum being hybridized. I'll wait. Nobody? Okay, moving on. Again, if you're not sure if hybridization is good for us, I've done a video for you. I'll link it up here. Last but not least, it is also a non-GMO grain. There is no genetically modified sorghum or anything like that. So it is gluten-free, an ancient grain. It has been hybridized like everything. And surprisingly, the United States is one of the top producers of it. Pretty cool, eh? All right, next up is the nutritional benefit of sorghum. So on top of the typical whole grain benefits like high in B vitamins, magnesium, iron, phosphorus, potassium, as well as fiber, so long as it's in its whole grain form. It is actually really high in antioxidants. And it's actually high in protein for a grain. So about the fiber, to kind of give you an idea, half cup of cooked sorghum provides about 7 grams of fiber, which is 25% of the daily recommended dose. So an excellent way, again, to get in fiber, as is most whole grains in its whole form. But what it surprised me was actually that it was high in protein, comparable to quinoa, which is another grain we will be exploring in the Grains Explorer Challenge this year. A half cup of cooked sorghum, which isn't that much, actually contains a whopping 11 grams of protein. And if you're not sure how much that is, one large egg equals 6 grams of protein. So for a little bit of this grain, you can get the equivalent of 2 eggs in protein. So if you're wanting to increase your amount of protein, but you love whole grains, or even plant-based, and you're looking for a higher plant-based food that's high in protein, this is a good one to use. And of course, another nutritional benefit is the fact that it is gluten-free, so it is safe for those with celiac disease or any other gluten allergy or gluten intolerance to be able to eat, and no problem there. Number 3, what sorghum is used for? And this actually surprised me when I was doing the research about this grain. So basically what it's used for is the 4 big F's: food, feed, fodder, and fuel. Yes, fuel. Crazy enough, 30 to 40% of the United States sorghum production is actually used for ethanol. And the reason why this is praised is because it produces the same amount of ethanol per bushel of sorghum as other grains that are used, but it uses a third less water. So it's a little bit better for the environment that way. The second thing that it's used for is for food. Obviously, you can eat it. Moving on. Third that it's used for is for feed. So it is actually very prominent in animal feed, be it dairy animals, cattle, swine, poultry, and it's also used for pet food as well, like dogs and fish, etc. And it's also used for fodder. This is actually the stems and foliage are used for things like hay and various things like that. So that's what makes it such a great crop to grow, is because the entire plant can actually be used for all the different things. All right, next up, types of sorghum sold. As in, if you were to go buy sorghum, what are your options out there? So like quinoa, it actually comes in many different colors, but every color kind of has its own usage. So it comes in white, tan, orange, red, bronze, and black varieties. Now here's how that actually breaks down and how they're typically used. Red, orange, and bronze sorghum is versatile enough to be used from animal feed all the way to regular human food, and even to fuel. Tan, cream, and white grain tends to be ground up and used for sorghum flour for the food industry. Burgundy and black sorghum are actually the highest in their antioxidants. Now, a newer variety that was developed by Texas A&M is actually onyx sorghum. It's related to the ancient black and high tannin sorghum varieties, and it's designed to be super high in antioxidants. So that was another fun fact there, is the different colors kind of varies on how they're used in our markets today. Now, let's see what's actually used in recipes. So first of all, you have the whole grain sorghum. That has the bran, the germ, the endosperm. It is the whole grain sorghum. Do note, this is the type that we will be using for our Grains Explorer Challenge. It's your typical whole grain sorghum. You also, like barley, have a pearled sorghum. And just like barley, that means that it's been stripped of its bran and some of its germ. And then finally, y'all probably heard it before, sorghum syrup. It comes from the stalks of sweet sorghum that is grown, and it is a sweetener that is very similar to molasses. In fact, if you have a recipe that calls for molasses, but you're wanting to use sorghum syrup, it generally can be substituted, a 1-to-1 substitute. Again, what we're using for the Grains Explorer Challenge is the whole grain sorghum. It can be found on Amazon. Azure Standard, I've been told, now has it back in stock. Whenever I was buying it, they did not have it in stock. And you may actually be able to find it at your local grocery store, the same aisle as the quinoa and the bulgur wheat. Now, last but not least, how to use sorghum. Again, all the extra specific recipes, videos, all those things will be available to the grainy bunch. So y'all be sure to be checking that out if you're my grainies. But I'm going to give you a few ideas to get you started on this challenge. First of all, sorghum can just be used as a replacement for rice or quinoa. You just boil it up and then you can pop your mashed potatoes or gravy or whatever it is that you like. Just treat it as you would rice or quinoa, and sorghum can be used instead. You, of course, can also mill it into your own flour. It's actually very common to find sorghum in gluten-free flour mixes. And for those of you who have Sue Becker's Home Ground Flour Cookbook, there actually is a gluten-free mix recipe in there that you can actually mill yourself. So for those of you, if for whatever reason you are wanting or needing to be gluten-free, I do recommend to make your own gluten-free mix by milling those grains yourself for the maximum benefit. So her cookbook actually does have a recipe using sorghum among other grains to make a gluten-free flour mix. Now you also can try to substitute sorghum in some of your recipes, usually a 1-to-1 ratio when it's calling for a wheat flour. Just know, being a gluten-free grain, it does not have that binding agent that gluten gives you. That's why it usually has to be combined with something like xanthan gum or cornstarch. So be mindful of that. I would maybe start with muffins, things like that. Again, I am pre-recording this before I've actually experimented myself to kind of get ahead. So I experiment with you guys. I'm walking this journey with y'all. Now, the surprising thing about sorghum is you can actually pop it like popcorn, which is crazy. I'm so excited to try because I love popcorn, and I'm excited to actually pop sorghum myself to actually see how easy it is. Usually you just do it like you pop popcorn on the stovetop. So if you know how to do that, pop it. It is smaller. I do know that Azure Standard actually sells popped sorghum, and it's popped sorghum in its whole grain form. I've looked at the ingredients, so you can check that out as well, or just do it yourself at home. But how cool is that? And it's more nutritional and maybe even be easier on the stomach than typical popcorn. And last but not least, you can flake sorghum just like you do barley or oats, and then you can use that in making your own type of hot cereal, like equivalent to oatmeal, or throw it in your special granola recipe. So there you go. You have been introduced to sorghum. Again, I just love researching all of these grains. This has been such a great challenge for me to get out of my comfort zone because I've literally had sorghum on my shelf for a while and I've never once used it. So I will definitely be having fun experimenting this month with this grain, and I hope you do too. Again, if you ever post any recipes or anything like that on social media, be sure to tag me and use the hashtag GrainsExplorer so I can see your wonderful creations. If you have been following us thus far on a Grains Explorer challenge, let me know how it's going in the comments below, and be sure to check out here for the playlist so you can jump in at any time during this year in 2024 to jump in and challenge yourself to explore new grains. As always, I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and I will talk to y'all next week. Bye.